All right, folks, I am super sorry about the delayed videos. As you all know, I referee sports, and sometimes my time gets pulled away, and it is what it is. So I'm trying to get videos out every 2 weeks, and hopefully we can kind of cut that down to once a week. Once I get a schedule that is consistent with being able to talk about the case. We already talked about the police, the detectives and some of the attorneys, but let's just get to the co-defendants. Now, let me tell you something right now, though. Individuals that were summoned by the court, and we're supposed to have the smoking gun with some of these folks, it wasn't there. My first time seeing these individuals, I'm thinking that when I come in, I'm going to hear information that's going to be like, okay, then I can start connecting dots and kind of go along the blueprint that Attorney Steele presented to us. But of course, the state gave us a heads up saying that, okay, what you're going to hear is that these individuals were intimidated or are going to feel intimidated when they come to court. They're going to lie, but based on the evidence, is going to show that, hey, they were part of this organized crime that was going on in the city. To be perfectly honest with you, and just speeding up a little bit, I never saw that. What I did see are individuals acting alone, but it wasn't in an organized situation that Jeffrey Williams at the very top and just giving orders here and there. I would think that if the state were going to bring in their witnesses, that they would at least know that they were going to testify. Going on by an interrogation video that took place years ago, before this time, and then using it currently, if the folks have already committed their crime and they were already sentenced to that, why are you trying to retry them? Now, if they impeached, which we were told in the courtroom that and with some of the language that the state used, if they were impeaching on their testimony, then that was up to the state to decide what they want to do with it. But pretty much the state owned a lot of these people based on the indictment and their names that they signed on the dotted line based on allegedly certain things. So let's just begin with Quadarius Zachary. How and why would you bring someone in the courtroom and they're having health issues? I do not understand. Now, he comes in, we're looking at him, I'm looking at him, I'm like, okay, then let me see his story, let me hear his story. But there's a sense of, if he's telling you that he is sick and you want him to testify, why not create an environment for him that he would have been a little bit more receptive in answering questions and not badgering? And I think at some point, I think Judge Whitaker said, since it was their witness, they brought him in, that they needed to provide him accommodations until he had to come back in the next week or so. Quadarius Zachary provided information that was nothing. He stuck to whatever he had to stick to, and that is what we were going by in the courtroom. When we get down to Moontunk, now, talking about something that really upset me the most is Moontunk, I think, was a little bit older, and he was very cordial to the court, and he answered questions like thoroughly. And that's like the other thing. If you were answering questions, in my personal opinion, then I felt like that you were cooperating and you weren't just kind of like skidding your way through. He answered questions. He came across as authentic. We were only going by the facts that what he knew during those times. But the one thing that upset me the most is the state slid it in a language in his indictment that he was unaware of. And I kind of blame his attorney, because the attorney should have thoroughly gone through that indictment and not trusting the state before he was doing negotiations and taking a plea deal based on his testimony to the court. Whatever happened afterwards, I don't know. But at the end of the day, why would you have someone come into the courtroom, and when it's brought to our attention, because there were two television screens that we could see. There was one big screen computer screen that was touched, like that you know go up there and touch, and we saw the indictment, his indictment. Then we had like a small television at the top, and so when it was brought to our attention that the state inserted a language in there, and he was unaware of it, and his attorney was unaware of it. That's how I think the state was so desperate to be able to say, hey, we got you. You know, now we can sit here and own you, and you have to testify to whatever any question that we have to ask. And if you impeach that, this is what we'll do. That was so low. And Moontunk provided information that was good, but it was not sufficient to the state. And what I mean by that, meaning that it didn't really give the state any leverage whatsoever. To me, the state pretty much screwed themselves over with Moontunk. I mean, you question him on and on and on and on, and he was answering every last one of them. But when you showed us that you inserted something into the document and he was unaware of it, and I think he said that he was able to explain in court, but they were also referring back to what he said back then. Whatever happened years ago, we're not trying him in the court of law. We're just only trying to get information concerning YSL, and there was no information that was provided that gave the state any leverage to his testimony, period. We get to Antonio Sumlin, Obama, same exact thing. Now, he came in and he was nervous, and when we saw that, I mean, he was legit nervous. But he was cooperative. I mean, he was cooperating. He was asking questions. The state tried to trick him with his, some of his words and things. And I mean, and of course, that's their job as attorneys. But the guy stayed the course. Like, he was saying, well, hold on for a moment. This is what I said. This is what I meant. And like I said, we'll go to the evidence and we'll dissect some of these things. Specifically, I wanted to make sure that we keep everything separate. Only because if I kind of start weaving things through, the video will be too long. So I'm just kind of giving you an introduction about how I saw these individuals when they came to the stand. So Antonio Sumlin came up there nervous. He answered questions. They tried to trip him up with his words. He didn't let it budge. He got through it. It was what it was. Walter Murphy, DK. Walter Murphy, DK would have been a smoking gun for the case had the state was able to trip him up. Now, Walter Murphy, as we know, was the co-founder of YSL. He came up, he had a lot of information. And when the state said, well, you stated that you were over in this area, and he was quickly telling you, like, no, I wasn't there. Now, everybody, like I said, he followed the script. He stuck to it. The state tried to trip him up. It just didn't work. Things weren't adding up. And so we got what we got. We look at Winnie Lee. If the state wanted to use lyrics, and as I stated beforehand, it was a slippery slope for bringing lyrics into the courtroom, because to me, it's a freedom of speech, and I'm going to always stand by that. But you have somebody who is an artist who, one, none of these individuals were going to ever testify against each other on the stand, and none of these individuals were going to say anything that was going to impeach currently what they were saying on the stand based on their indictment. Now, if the state, because I think that one of the attorneys made a statement about this, and I agree with him about it on the defense side. If the state felt that any of these co-defendants that came on the stand did not provide sufficient evidence, that what they deem as sufficient evidence to the court, then pretty much they're going to jail. And they deem that, whatever that looks like, I don't know. But to me, I'm sitting there saying to myself, if you have these individuals come into the courtroom, you should know how they're going to answer questions. And forcing us to sit down to look at hours of interrogation that took place years ago, we can only go by what's current. We can only go by what they say on the stand. Whatever they said back on a video when they were being interrogated, that is not our concern at this point. It was pretty much what was going to be on the stand. So we saw that. We definitely did see that with Winnie Lee. Winnie Lee came up there, he answered questions. I believe that further on, of course, I think that we almost had a mistrial because of the language or whatever he said in court later on, which we'll get to later on. But he answered questions accordingly, and that's what happened. When we get down to, and this is when it gets kind of, I'll say, this shifted some of the jurors in a manner, I think, based on how some of these individuals were treated. You gotta look at Miss Bennett. Miss Bennett came up and she testified, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, when we first saw her, she came in and she was handcuffed by the wrist and handcuffed by her feet. And she comes in, and here I'm thinking, like, okay, who's this witness? I mean, is she hostile or whatever? But what really pissed me off, and what really pissed some of the other jurors off, is bringing something personal, a private discussion between Attorney Love and her, and how defensive she was, because it was like, why are you bringing this into the courtroom? If you're going to help somebody and you're authentically trying to help them, and I believe that was a point that she said that, Love said that you were afraid that you may harm yourself or whatever. Don't try to bring that to the courtroom. That's something that you all discuss privately, and trying to woo her, to empathize with her, to make it seem like you care about her. And then all of a sudden you get on the stand and you shred her to pieces as though she wasn't anything. She's a human being. Why are you sitting over here bringing this into the courtroom? Our job is to get the facts, and you're bringing all these emotional stuff inside here, thinking that it's going to woo any of these jurors. And quite frankly, you might have touched one or two, but there was a point where people thought it was grimy. That is the day that I think that we saw how low the state had gotten. And I put the state in as a whole, because there could have been another way that could have been handled. She comes in handcuffed. The next day, she's in her regular clothes, and you expect for her to come and to cooperate with you in court while she's on the stand. There's no way. There's absolutely no way. You pretty much just like discarded her, like as though like, okay, then hey, because we felt that you were going to leave or do X, Y, Z, we're going to sit there and arrest you. And then all of a sudden, we need you to come and testify. But she's a human being. So one of the jurors near me was really pissed. And she said a couple of words underneath her breath. And she was like, I cannot believe that District Attorney Love did that. Like, and it was a consensus from a lot of the jurors during that time. I mean, when we got back to the jury room, I will say that people were heated, like pissed, because we saw a different side that really touched a few people. At the least you could have done was to act on you empathizing, but you pretty much just trying to put her into a trap and going by her emotions. And I get that's a tactic, but you just don't treat people like that on the stand. You really don't do that. So that shifted. That's when you start seeing some of the jurors starting to dislike the state really fast, because it hit too close to home. We get down to Tick, Travus Stevens. Now, Travus Stevens, we saw videos of him. We watched him in videos, and the guy came. I mean, folks, these individuals had committed the crimes beforehand. I'm not trying to say that they're all innocent. I mean, I get it. People do things, and they have to. They go through. They pay the crime for it. I mean, they pay, put their time in for doing the crime or whatever. But Travus Stevens was legit when I looked at him and wanted to know his story, what I was gathering throughout the whole entire testimony. But this is, like I said, we'll go into we'll like dive into some of the things that they were talking about that were, if they provided good information that we needed to know about. But when it came down to Tick, you see this guy trying to get his life back to normal. You try to see this guy trying to live his life. He knew that he was on the wrong track beforehand, and now he's trying to provide for himself and his family. And you come in and you summon him from his job. And I think there was another witness too as well, side note, is that he felt threatened because the state summoned him on a short notice and he had to leave work. And they didn't give him like enough time. He felt afraid, and that's how serious it was. So it didn't sit well with some of us when I think he just started working, I think driving trucks or doing something, whatever it was. And he had to miss out on work based on the state had summoned him. So Travus Stevens would have had good information, but it, like I said, the state just did not prep themselves for most of these witnesses. Now, the biggest one of all, as you all know, the important witness that would have been a smoking gun would have been Little Woody, Ken Copeland. Now, we were told from the very beginning, I remember in the opening arguments, that, Little Woody was painted as a person that you could not trust. Now, if you all remember the young woman from Pakistan, or the one woman from New York went to Pakistan, and she was up there during the press conference with the other gentleman, and she leaned over to him and said, "You talk too much." That is how I looked at Ken Copeland. I don't know him from at all from Timbuktu, but a lot of folks recognize or know this case, and they start watching this court case based on Ken Copeland. And he was supposed to be the smoking gun that was able to provide the most information, that he acted on all these things, and in some instances that the reason why everything started because of him. If it did, we really just did not connect the dots that way. I'm not gonna lie to you about that. We can assume certain things, but at the same time, we could not prove that certain things that, at the end of the day, is that I could not trust anything that he was saying on the stand. I don't recall. That was when I tell you that I got so tired of hearing those words. I don't recall. I cringe. And I will say that, go by D. Williams' statement from "This is a Circus," that is when things became a circus. And I believe that after he testified, I think we had 7 weeks off, if I'm not mistaken. If that was like the time, I had to check my calendar for that. But in Ken Copeland, you bring him up there, you're asking all these questions, and hours of questioning. We're watching interrogation videos. And there was a point when, maybe you all probably didn't see this though, but kind of interesting. We thought there was a point when he was looking at the videos or listening to a statement from his, because there was a laptop, and then if you look to the left side, there was like another screen that people could actually touch. And he began to start playing with the screen. And so one of the jurors hit me on the leg, like, "Do you see this?" Evidently, they thought that he had showed our faces on the closed circuit televisions that were in the courtroom. And I'm not sure if you saw one of the deputies come over, and then ever since then, they took the TV away. I believe that he was told not to touch the laptop. And I think there are times when you didn't see laptop in front of him, or the TV to the left was actually was shut off though. But one thing, I don't know why they brought him in. I don't know why Ken Copeland why they summoned him to come to the courtroom. He played a huge role of acting and information that the state thought that he was going to provide. I'm gonna tell you right now, it wasn't there. All of these co-defendants that came in, there was not one person who would have provided the best information to side with the state. Now, I go back to my original statement once before. The one person who should have tried this case and would have helped us navigate these stories would have been Simone. District Attorney Love should not have been on this court case. This right here was just not, it was just, you gotta know your audience. And I'm not saying that you have to like everybody, because I know people don't like me and of course you or whomever, but at the end of the day, you gotta know your audience. And when I'm sitting in this courtroom and I'm forced to sit here from 9 a.m. until 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening time on most days, I expect to come to the court and to hear something that's going to get my attention. And I'm not sitting here scratching my head asking, what is the whole point? None of these individuals that came inside here provided any information for the state. Whatever they did a few years beforehand, and we saw them being interrogated by police officers who were doing their job. I'm not discounting what they were doing, and detectives as well. What they did then and what we were being given in the courtroom those days, it was night and day. The entire time, night and day. So I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, this case really took a lot of mental and financial hits, point blank. And I'm not saying that these co-defendants are innocent whatsoever. They know what they have done and what they are doing currently to hopefully provide a good life for themselves and to grow from any mistakes that might have happened to them, just like we all make mistakes. But it's just sad that we had to sit through all of this for an entire year. It's just sad, and it's so much information, overwhelming information, that I try my best to kind of put you in the headspace and not, because my frustrations is over. I mean, I'm back to a normal life, and I hope that everybody's back to a normal life. But I was only going by what was in front of me. A lot of you all, I know you had extra commentators and social media influencers, and you all knew more than we did, but we were told to only go by what's presented in court. We didn't have the luxury of getting up and go getting a snack whenever we wanted to, or sitting down at our desk and listening to everything with our headphones and taking breaks whenever we wanted to. We were stuck in the courtroom for hours, and it really, it's just, I'm not gonna lie to you, it's just disappointing. It really is. And I don't know what to say other than this should have never gone to trial, period. This should have never gone to trial on the magnitude that it did. And we will touch bases on the next episode. We're going to dive into the evidence and some of the testimonies that the individuals I've talked about, from the detectives to some of the attorneys to the co-defendants. And only I can say is the fact that it was sloppy. And I don't know. Like I said, I get worked up about it now because a whole year of your whole entire life, and thank God we weren't sequestered. But it really took a lot to sit through and to dive in so much information. And I think the state could have taken a different path in doing this case, but the verdict that we reached was based on what was provided in court. That's it. So, like I said, we're going to talk about the evidence, and then we're going to talk about, of course, the deliberation. We're going to talk about the murders that took place, which is going to be an episode of its own, because that's another thing. I mean, you can't. I don't know, folks. I mean, it's just so much to dive into that, quite frankly, that's the reason why it takes about 2 weeks to do this, because I'm having to make sure that what I'm providing you and what I'm giving you is from my perspective, and the frustration that when I talk about it, I'm out here, refereeing, enjoying my life, and out here in the skies, friendly skies, and flying around. And then I chose to hopefully bring information to you. And I feel like that some of you probably felt the same way when listening to this court case. So until then, I'll see you all in about 2 weeks or so, probably if not before. And be safe out here, and we'll talk real soon.